There is a feeling you already know. You don't need to have been in a war to know it. It lives in smaller moments. The surge in your chest when someone cuts in front of you. The heat that rises when something that's yours is threatened. The way your body makes a decision before your mind does. That feeling is very old. Older than language, older than cities, older than every war ever fought. But here is the thing almost nobody tells you. That feeling is not war. And for most of human history, the two things never met. For roughly 95% of the time our species has existed, there was almost no archaeological evidence of organized warfare. Not a little evidence. Almost none. Which means the assumption most of us carry that humans have always been at war, that violence is simply what we are, is not supported by the ground we came from. War was not discovered inside us. It was invented. And we know with uncomfortable precision when. Let's start with what the ground actually shows. Archaeology does not lie the way people do. It does not have an agenda. It just holds what was left behind. And for most of human prehistory, what it holds is nearly silent on the subject of war. Hunter-gatherer societies, the way every human lived for the first 95% of our existence, do show violence, interpersonal conflict, individual killings, the occasional raid. But not war. Not organized, sustained, group versus group violence aimed at territorial conquest or the destruction of another people. Anthropologist Douglas Fry spent decades compiling cross-cultural data on hunter-gatherer violence. His conclusion was stark. The majority of nomadic forager societies have no warfare at all. What they have is closer to what any social animal has. Conflict between individuals, resolved quickly, usually without mass casualties, often by one party simply leaving. You already know this resolution. The Bushmen called it voting with your feet. If the tension got unbearable, you walked to the next camp. There was always a next camp. There was always somewhere else to go. That option is what war eventually destroyed. But before we get to that, it is worth sitting with what those societies actually looked like. Because the image most of us carry of prehistoric humans is of something brutal and short. Nasty, as the philosopher put it. That image is not what the evidence shows. Skeletal remains from hunter-gatherer populations show low rates of traumatic injury. Their bones do not carry the marks that war leaves behind. No embedded projectiles, no healed sword cuts, no mass graves.
Now here is the site that changed everything. In 2012, a team of researchers led by Marta Mirazan-Lar at the University of Cambridge excavated a site on the western shore of Lake Turkana in Kenya. The site is called Nataruk. What they found there was dated to approximately 10,000 years ago. 27 skeletal remains, men, women, and children. At least 6 showed evidence of blunt force trauma to the skull. 5 had projectile wounds, obsidian fragments still embedded in the bone. Several were found with their hands positioned in a way suggesting they had been bound before they were killed. One woman was found pregnant. She was killed anyway.
Nataruk is the oldest confirmed evidence of organized group violence in the archaeological record. 10,000 years ago. Not 300,000, not 100,000, 10,000. And here is what makes that number important. 10,000 years ago is almost exactly when something else began. Agriculture. Independently on multiple continents, in cultures that had no contact with each other, the same pattern appears in the archaeological record at almost exactly the same time. Humans settle, humans farm. And then, within a few generations, the bones start showing war wounds. Brian Ferguson, an anthropologist at Rutgers University, spent years analyzing skeletal evidence from the transition period between foraging and farming across dozens of sites worldwide. His finding was consistent everywhere he looked. Before agriculture, trauma rates in skeletal remains are low. After agriculture, they rise sharply. Not slightly, sharply. This is not a coincidence. It is a pattern. And the pattern points to a cause.
When humans were nomadic, there was almost nothing worth fighting a war over. You could not own land, you were always leaving. You could not hoard food, you had to carry. Your wealth was your relationships, your knowledge of the terrain, your ability to move. None of that could be seized by an army. Then came the farm. The farm changed everything it touched. It produced surplus. Surplus created storage. Storage created ownership. Ownership created the thing that had never existed before in the entire history of the species. Something worth taking. And something worth taking is something worth defending. And something worth defending is something worth killing for. War was not born from rage. It was not born from hatred. It was not born from some darkness coiled in the center of the human animal. It was born from grain, a stored harvest, a marked boundary, a field that took a season to grow and could feed your children through the winter. For the first time in 300,000 years, a human being had something that could be taken away. The first soldiers were not monsters. They were farmers who had something to lose. And the people who took from them were not monsters either. They were often other farmers or foragers pushed off land that had been theirs long before anyone drew a line across it. What followed was not human nature expressing itself. It was a new logic, produced by a new set of conditions, spreading across the ancient world like the agriculture that caused it. By 5,000 years ago, fortified walls appear around settlements on every continent. Weapons shift from tools used for hunting into tools designed specifically to kill people. A new type of human being appears in the record. The warrior, the soldier, the man whose entire social role is organized violence in service of someone else's surplus. We built that. Not from instinct, from inventory. Here is the part that sits uncomfortably with everything else. The same development that ended mass starvation, that fed more humans than had ever been fed before, also produced every war in recorded history. These are not separate stories. They are the same story. The surplus that kept your ancestors alive through winter is the same surplus that gave someone else a reason to march an army toward them in spring. We did not inherit war from the animals. The animals do not have war. They have conflict, competition, territory, but not the organized, sustained, ideologically justified mass violence that has defined the last 10,000 years of human history. We built that ourselves, with the same hands that built everything else. And we taught it forward, every generation inheriting a world already shaped by the logic of the one before, already divided into boundaries, already organized around the defense of surplus, already trained to see the people across the valley as a potential threat. You were born into that inheritance. You did not choose it. Neither did anyone currently fighting in any war happening right now on the other side of a screen you will check tonight. They were handed the same conditions you were handed. They just happened to be standing somewhere the conditions turned lethal. Here is where the question lands that the evidence doesn't answer. If war was invented, if it emerged not from our nature, but from a specific set of conditions we created, then it is, in principle, the kind of thing that can be uninvented. Not easily, not quickly, not in any time frame that would feel like comfort to anyone alive today. But the ground says something that 10,000 years of recorded history has done its best to make us forget. There was a version of us that did not do this. That version existed for hundreds of thousands of years. They were not saints. They were not peaceful by philosophy or religion or conscious choice. They were peaceful by circumstance, because they had not yet built the conditions that made war logical. We built those conditions. We have built conditions before. We are building conditions right now. The question is not whether humans are capable of violence. The bones at Nataruk already answered that. The question is quieter than that, and harder. We built a world that made war make sense. What kind of world would have to exist for it not to?